Casat Podcast Network.
Welcome to Season 6 of Casat Conversations, where we sit down with professionals who have spent decades in their fields like mental health, addiction treatment, business, sociology, and more. In this special season, our guests share valuable wisdom from their careers, reflect on what has kept them grounded and inspired, and offer advice for future generations. Whether you're new to the field, uncertain about your next steps, or feeling burned out, these conversations provide guidance and reassurance from those who've walked this path. Let's dive into today's episode. Today, I am delighted to welcome Dr. Mary Shadley to our show. Mary has been a mentor and a friend, a colleague, even my advisor way back in the day. And so I'm really looking forward to today's conversation. Thanks, Mary, for being here with us.
Thank you, Heather.
So please share with our audience a little bit about, or a lot, whatever you prefer, about your career journey and where it's taken you and where you are today.
You know, I was thinking about that this morning and thinking, well, how do I want to say what my background is? I was thinking, maybe just to talk about the beginning. When I came out of my master's program, who would have thought that drug and alcohol treatment was the place that I was going to end? I had no idea. But my first job was actually being able to work with teenagers in a kind of a front building where kids would drop in, and a lot of them were homeless. A lot of them were running away from home or struggling with drug and alcohol. And it ranged from like, say, 14 to 22 is really the age range. And it was exciting. I loved young people, and I was young at that point too. And so it felt like I was a big sister in some ways, that I could come in with just a little bit more experience in life than some of them, but certainly different experience because some of their experiences were much more streetwise. I wasn't very streetwise at that point. Um, Even now, I don't think of myself as being streetwise. Um, but it really set the stage for a couple of different things. One, it set for the stage for a feeling of acceptance that people take a lot of different paths around on their life journey. And it also set the stage that you need a community and you can't do this alone. That I needed it and that they needed it. And so that's how I kind of came into it and how I actually ended up becoming a marriage and family therapist. Because I realized working with teenagers, you couldn't just work with them in isolation. You really needed to work with them within either their friendship group or their family or a situation where their community in some way, because that was so important to them. So I really kind of honor, I guess, and appreciate that my initiation into the field because it really set the direction of my career. So from that, I became both a drug and alcohol counselor and a marriage and family therapist. And my identity has stayed with that since the time I was 22. So it's like, wow, that's pretty exciting to find your path so early. That's gone different ways along the time. It's gone a little bit more marriage and family, or a little bit more drug and alcohol at different times and different stages of my career. And also the population I work with, although I still feel like I am comfortable and like working with teenagers and with their families. I'm working more with couples now. That's something that's opened up as I am older. Couples are more interested in coming to someone who has a little bit more life experience, maybe was in a relationship themselves for a long time, that kind of thing. And certainly the drug and alcohol piece, just all the things that I've had an opportunity to learn about from people in the field and also from people who have suffered with addiction and what they have taught me. But I mean, I think the drug and alcohol field is a prime example of what community is about. They taught us that that's what really works, is creating that community of support.
That makes so much sense.
Yeah, so that really has led me down many paths. One, I personally think that as a provider in the field, that we need to build community and we need to make sure that that is a part of our vehicle for both helping and for taking care of ourselves.
Mhm. I know you also did your PhD at some point, and were involved in education. Can you share more about that part of your path?
Yeah, when I first finished my master's and went into the field, I really enjoyed the clinical work. And I had an opportunity to move from, I also have lived in both Las Vegas and Reno. So that's kind of exciting because I have a sense of both parts of the two larger parts of the state. So I lived in Las Vegas for 6 years, and I had an opportunity when I came to Reno to work in a federal grant that was teaching community providers, all kinds, probation officers, domestic violence advocates, social workers, um, nurses, whatever the population was of healthcare providers, about family therapy. So that started my journey around education. So got to do training and work with, we had over 200 people come through our training programs at that in those 3 years. So it was a real exciting time. And I learned that I enjoyed sharing all that I was learning with other people as well. And that I would learn from them and they would learn from me. And so we were able to, at that point, really focus on how to look at families, particularly those families that have substance use issues within the family and were struggling with that. So that was one of our focuses in that training program. When that ended, um, I wondered, like, what's next? And a lot of times I think people have a very clear picture of where they want to go. I tend to kind of follow what happens, what's presented. And so it was like, well, I could start a training institute, or I could go to school. Gosh, heaven forbid. I could go back to school and learn some more. So at that point, I went back and got my PhD through a program called Saybrook Institute out of San Francisco. It was one of the first external degree programs at that time. Those were not popular, were not viewed as very appropriate in some ways. But it was a great program because it integrated psychology with systems thinking, organizational systems, any kind of systems. And so I was able to do my PhD in what I call clinical systems counseling. And I was able to go and interview, my dissertation was interviewing people about their training experience and about their clinical experience. What was their pathway as they went through their training and now as they were providers in the field? And I got to do that around the country. Got to interview some people that ultimately became like, for example, Richard Swartz, who's the creator of Internal Family Systems. He was one of my interviewees. So how exciting! He hadn't created it yet. So that was a very exciting time to see. Well, how did he go from here to there? What was his pathway as a career professional? And so that set the stage, I think, to my desire to really help people get the kind of training that they wanted, that fit their personalities, perhaps, and their style and their approach. And so when CASAT was developed back in 1993, and there was an opportunity for a position there, boy, that seemed exactly correct for me. Seemed like, wow, this is exactly what I want to be doing. I want to still see clients, but I really want to be a part of building the field and helping people reach their dreams.
What advice do you have for people who are trying to find their path?
I think a lot of times because we live in a community and we say, well, this is the program that's here. And so this is the program I should take. Sometimes that's not the best choice. You have to, I think, become more clear about who you are and what matters to you. So for example, if I went to a program where they were very rigid about, you have to see clients with this approach and you have to think this way, that wouldn't have worked for me. It does work for some people, and it certainly works early in our career. We need structure early in our career. So it helps to have something that gives us direction. But if we're a little bit more fluid, if we um, like to integrate, which I'm a person like that, a real rigid program would have been counter to my personality and counter to the way in which I think. And so, what I found in my dissertation research, for example, is that if you went to a program that didn't fit you very well, it took 4, 5, 6 years to feel competent that you could do it, the work. So there was a lot of questioning and doubt, and confusion because you weren't able to bring in who you are to your professional being. So one of my major things is really check into what you're looking at and who you are and what kind of work you want to do. When I was at the university and advising students, I felt like instead of saying, "Hey, here's a program, go to it," I would say, "Who are you? Tell me about you. Tell me about your dreams." And then talk about the different programs that exist and what might fit them so that when you come out of your master's and are ready to be doing a clinical practice or ready to be working with people, you are able to feel not necessarily, oh, I'm great, because we all have imposter syndrome to some extent forever, but at least you're not working contrary to who you are. And I think that's really critical. And I know it's hard in our financial situation in today's world, but money isn't everything, and happiness and being able to feel good about the work you're doing is as important as survival to some extent, because it's a part of survival, that emotional truth. So I would recommend that you really look at yourself, question, what ways do you want to work with people? How are you with your friends? How are you with your family? That may be an overlay as to how you will want to interact in some ways with your clients, if that makes sense.
It does. As you're talking, I'm thinking back. You advised me many, many years ago. And one of the things that I really appreciated about how the advice you gave me at that time was being creative about thinking about the future in a way. I remember I wanted to go into one program and I knew it wasn't a good fit. And so you could see lots of different paths and gave me kind of, you know, a nice summary of those paths. And then I was able to find one for me. And I was very similar like you in I ended up being a grad special in a gerontology class because that was the only class that was open when I was going to go through and go through the Human Development and Family Studies master's program. And had I not taken that class, my career trajectory would have looked so different. So there was like being open and curious and sort of that going with the flow and continuing to tune in has definitely served me well in my career as well. And I feel like you model that beautifully. So thank you for that.
No, thank you. Yeah. It really makes a difference, I think, because it creates a happiness And I think we are going to be more productive in our careers then. And it affects so much of us. If we're not happy at work, we're really usually not happy at home.
Mm-hmm.
That
Mm-hmm.
can certainly influence it. And so I have a friend now who says that her job is to heal people in their work environment. That's a part of her job, and she's doing management consultations and things like that. Well, I feel like there is such an overlay that we need to really be looking at all those dimensions of ourselves at as much as we can at the same time, so that we really can be our best selves in all of those places. And if we're not doing what feeds our heart and our beliefs and the way we handle people, then we're going to be pretty miserable in our work world.
Mm-hmm. That makes so much sense. And there's also a piece of it that I heard as you were speaking earlier about being in an environment where we feel safe to be ourselves. Um, and the importance of that. And then I'm thinking also of the work that your friend does, how critically important that is to us showing up so that we can do whatever work we want to do.
Right. Well, and even, like for example, when I came to university, I know they were looking for a full-time person. And I just didn't want to give up my private practice totally. So luckily for me, Gary Fisher said, you know what? We'll make it work because we think you're the right person for here. But it sounds like you have some other things. And it's a way in which I actually um, felt that I kept the university and the community and both parts of my work together, and that really worked, I think, uh, for how I've been able to have a trajectory of my career. Because I believe we're a part of our community. I believe the university is a part of our community and that the community is a part of our university.
Yeah, that makes so much sense to me. I would imagine that what you were doing in your clinical practice definitely informed and kept you relevant with examples to share with students that really informed your teaching so that you did stay fresh and current and relevant.
Well, even now, although I've retired from university, I'm still seeing clients and I'm still supervising interns. And it seems to me as though it does. I mean, I want to know what's really happening in today's world because it's a little bit different than, say, 40 years ago.
Mhm.
Not totally different, though. Knowing human beings are still striving and desiring many of the same kinds of things in terms of happiness and in terms of positive relationships and in terms of being able to get past those dark things within and abound so that they can live a better life. Those are still the same. But it is a different world and I need to know what that world looks like. I need to be
Mhm.
talking to people and hearing their stories so that I can stay up.
What are some of those shifts that you've seen in the 40 years you've been practicing?
We one of the things is that we repeat. About every 30 years, you see a repetition, which is interesting. I knew about it. I'd heard about it in terms of clothing. There was a Nehru jacket somewhere back in the 60s or 70s or whenever that came. And then all around that sort of came back. And so it started making sense to me that if it happened in fashion, we had a pendulum swing. We have a pendulum swing politically, for example. We go from far left to far right. We do it in many, many, many dimensions of our world. And so the same thing is true in the field. When I first came into the field, um, one of the things that happened is that there was a separation really between those who had not had substance use issues but were working in the field and those who were in recovery, although that wasn't the word that was being used then. Um, those who had had issues and maybe didn't care about education. Because they had life education. Um, so there was more separation between those two groups, and we were not talking to each other as well. Uh, but the crisis of the 70s and all the young people, the war, Vietnam War, and then the young people starting to use substances, and that crisis brought us together and made us start talking to each other in a way that we had not done before. And I think that piece is really critical and has lasted longer. There was a time when we started to move away from it again, but we've come back where I think we see um, that people who have both education and life experience are our best providers. That doesn't mean we have to have had a substance use problem, for example, to work with people who do, because we're also working with the families. We're also working with everybody that's around that. But we do understand differently. And so if we can reach out to each other, I think that's one of the things we're seeing that has lasted. And I'm so happy. I learned so much from the folks in AA, for example, or NA. I mean, I learned so much about life and about what the needs were rather than my coming from an ivory tower of the university or, some other life experience, you know, that didn't give me that knowledge. One of my brightest and most exciting times in my career was working with the young people at the university in recovery and learning so much from them, learning so much about what really mattered and how I could be present with them and help them find the path that they wanted, just like our students. It's the same as a student trying to find the path of work. It's the person trying to find their path of life.
Mm. Hmm.
So that's one of the changes I think we've seen.
As you look back at your career, I'm curious, what are you most proud of, or what's closest to your heart that just still makes you feel warm?
Well, that's certainly the recovery students on campus. Really, the last 15 years of my career, for example, that's been a really big part. And I have every time we would have a meeting, I would probably tear up because I felt so excited to see the the movement and also to know that people were going to meet their dreams, that they were heading forward and that they weren't giving up on school just because they had had this detour that had been really hard and had maybe almost took them out, but they had found a way and that they were letting me into their lives. The other thing I noticed, I think that because of that particular group and people in recovery, I think people in recovery sometimes um, have done the deeper work. And that is, I admire that so much to really look within, to find the darkness, to to look at it, to challenge it, to say, I don't want that to be what defines me. I want these other things, all these other things to be the primary thing that defines me. And yet I accept it. I accept it and I am finding a way to forgive it, to forgive that part that, I lost myself in for a while. So that is probably one of the deepest, deepest places. The other thing, the other place is really working with families and knowing, I think it's easy to say, just tough love. That's what you need. You need just get that tough love going. I'm a parent. I've had my child too. And so knowing that love, It's such a deep love. So I think I've become more understanding of family dynamics in a way that I didn't have when I was a young person. When I was in my 20s, I didn't really understand that. And so I could easily jump in and go, hey, you parent, back off. I could easily feel that and want to do that. Um, I think now I understand that love in a different way and understand why it's so hard for families and why they're so angry also, because it's like, oh, I wanted so much more. I didn't want this to be our life's journey, and yet this is the part of what we're struggling with in our family. So I think that piece also has been, it feeds my understanding and my desire to see all sides. I can see the adolescent side, for example, who says, "Give me space, let me be." But I can also see the parent side saying, wait a minute, you're going down the wrong path. Come back." And how adamant they are sometimes, um, to their detriment, but I understand it. And so I think that has been, another joyful part, is being able um, to find the positive and understanding in all the choices, including the ones that don't work.
Mm-hmm.
No, those are the 2 in terms clinically. In terms of, being a teacher at the university, that has also been a very, I am proud. I still, even though I've been retired since 2020, I identify myself as a staff member of CASAT. I am. I will always be there. My heart is always there. And so I say us and we all the time. It never says they. It never changes and gets externalized. It's always a part of my identity and a part of what matters to me. I think CASAT is miraculous. I think we have Nevada, Reno in particular, has been so lucky to have this organization, to help lead our students, to give back into the community the way it does, the trainings that are available. Um, I just it also is a part that warms my heart, because I see so many people who now are willing to work in the field because they learned that we don't stigmatize. We don't have to see the the damage. We can see the hope. And I think SAT taught that to me, and taught that, and teaches that to our students, and therefore to our field.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel very, very blessed. My career I've had many, many wonderful parts to it, and it's why I can't give it up. I keep thinking, well, I should stop working, and I go, and do what? Like, I'm going to go to the gym. Well, I already go to the gym. I don't need to go to the gym all day long.
Hmm. Yeah, it's your work has been a part of you for the vast majority of your life. And it sounds like it is just integrated. I mean, as you were talking about that wholeness, right? And being able to show up wholly as you are, I'm imagining that this is part of you showing up in that way still.
It is, and it's. I don't need to. I don't need to say this is over. Just like we never stop being a child of our parents, we never stop being a parent of our child. We are always in those roles, and this work is a part of who I am as a whole identity. Absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah, it's part of the fabric of your being.
hmm
Makes sense.
When I did my dissertation, I had no idea that I would go this direction, but because I thought I was just going to go out and interview people about their training experiences. But what I ended up doing was starting with a genogram, and as they did that, I started seeing the interweaving, that that who we are in one place is who we are oftentimes in another. And yes, we have to, you know, shave off kind of the rough edges, we aren't exactly the same, but the core of who we are is who we are wherever we go.
Mm-hmm.
And that interweaving is an important part of us. So I think that would be one of the major things I want folks who are starting their career out to make sense of. Like I had one intern who came in and she started her internship and she goes, "You know what? I don't think this is me. I want to work with my dad in real estate. I want to be a part of that business world." And she shifted after getting a master's degree. And I still see her around town and she's having a lovely life because she allowed herself to go towards what was really right for her. And I think that's what we have to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that ability to check ourselves, check in with ourselves, and honor how we feel, even when we've invested so much time, energy, money into our careers, it sometimes isn't right for us anymore. Maybe we outgrow it. I'm co-teaching a class right now on campus, and we have a student who's done exactly that, had been in a career and wants a shift, and so is coming back, in their mid-50s to start this new
Hmm.
career that they hope to find more meaning in.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and if we are willing to trust, I think, in that, and it's hard. It's hard to trust and let go a little bit of of the control to actually allow us to follow ourselves rather than lead ourselves all the time. EMDR is a new treatment approach that a lot of people are very finding very useful, and it's interesting for therapists because we're not supposed to talk that much. We're supposed to follow what the brain and the being of the person where they go rather than lead. And I think that is a piece of finding that balance between leading ourselves and following ourselves and whatever is around us to find the right pathway. We can err if we go too far on either side of that.
Yeah.
Too much not having any leadership towards ourselves or not having any willingness to follow and trying to push it.
Mhm. Yeah, when you can feel yourself. I mean, I can see different points in my career where I've leaned one way or maybe leaned the other, and what it's like to kind of, I don't know, the metaphor I can think of really is like being in the flow, right? Like there's the banks of the river and then I'm in the flow, which is actually how a therapist has described EMDR to me as well. It's kind of the therapist is the banks of the river, and then you're just in the flow of the experiences
Mhm.
of the
Mhm.
brain.
Well, and I think even when you think about folks in recovery, sometimes there's that push, I've got to do it this way, and that I have to remember sometimes that early on when we're doing anything, we do need more structure. We do need more. Uh, the bank needs to be a little. They need to come in a little bit, not have be as wide of a river because it's too frightening. There's too many rocks. There's too many things to fall into. We need to get it a stream a little bit and have a more direction. But as we strengthen and as we are more solid within our recovery, then that can be a wider river and we can have more because we can run into a rock and know how to get around it.
Mhm.
We've got more experience, we've got more readiness inside of ourselves. So again, it like you said, it changes at times. What we need changes a little bit and not necessarily making that be something wrong,
Mhm.
but being able to say, well, this is what I need right now. And as a supervisor, that's something I have to keep in mind because I might get way too gray. And sometimes people need real black and white, because they need to know that what they're doing is safe and right and good, because they don't have as much experience to be able to navigate the gray.
Mhm. Yeah, as we were talking about this, I was thinking about what you were saying about new professionals, right? And they need that more structure in order to be able to flow safely. And as, you gain experience, maybe that river widens.
But there's still a bank.
Yeah,
There's still banks.
yeah.
We know as terms of ethics, for example, we still have banks that says, no, we don't go outside this river.
Mhm. Mhm. How have you navigated some of those rocks or boulders that you've experienced along the way?
What comes to mind is when I went on a training one time, I was doing a training and I was probably in my 30s, I guess, mid 30s maybe. And there was somebody in the training and I don't know. I think they were struggling with the fact that they weren't doing the training, that I was doing the training. And they were smart and capable person. But they said some things to me that were really hard to hear. And I remember um hurting and thinking, gosh, am I really incompetent? Maybe I'm not any good. Maybe I shouldn't be training. There's something wrong here. They're right. I don't have any knowledge here. Um and my business partner said to me, you know, maybe they're right at 5 or 10%, but they're not 100% right. So one of the things that I find is if I can allow myself to look at the feedback, to look at the difficulties that I'm having, to not be frightened to look at it and to accept that there is some truth in maybe I'm not very good here or I didn't do that well. I wish I had done it differently. If I can look at that, I'm more able to take that as a learning and get better rather than beat myself up or run away or be defensive. Those are painful learnings, certainly. I mean, I certainly didn't feel very happy during that time period. But I think that willingness to know that we're not all black and white, we're not all perfect, we're not all awful, and that we're going to do some things that don't work well. For example, I am a little rebellious. Nancy, who was my boss at the university, would say, "Oh yeah, right, you are." And I have to know that because sometimes that pops in and I get kind of contrary just because I'm contrary. And so if I can laugh at that and go, "Oh, I think I'm being rebellious here. Is it useful now or is it not? Does it help?" I mean, sometimes it's a very useful thing about me, and sometimes it really gets in my way. And so I think that helps us navigate rocks as we're going along, because we're going to run into them for sure. We're going to have a boss we don't like, or we're going to have a situation, a client that we fail with, and we feel that we failed with, and partially we did. We have to own some of that, not all of it, um, and maybe face our imperfection. But it's only through that that we get better.
Mhm. Yeah, this ability to look inward at the things that are either difficult to look at or maybe we don't want, we want to push it away. The ability to here like accept that part of ourselves, befriend it. You're talking about the rebellious part, and it's almost like you've befriended that part. It's like, oh hi, how are you? And like, is now the right time for you to be here? It's yes or no. And so that
It makes me good with teenagers sometimes because we share that, "Oh, yeah, let's see what we could do."
uh-huh. I was picturing that being the teenager part of you.
Right.
And then that ability to laugh with ourselves
Mhm, mhm.
and forgive and yeah.
And not and I think in that way, if we do that with ourselves, we're more able to do that with our clients and the people that we run into, our coworkers. If we do it with them, maybe we can do it with ourselves. It's a two-way street going back and forth.
Mhm.
So I think that helps with navigating some of those rough spots. Um, Another one might be to remain curious, and I think that's the biggest word that if we can keep that in our in our way of being in the world, we're more able to listen to other people, challenge ourselves a little bit, um, and whether that be in our personal life or whether that be in our professional lives. Why would that be a good idea? Hmm. I mean, think about that.
Mhm. And that curiosity, I think, helps us to see more possibilities versus maybe just so black and white. I was thinking about what you were saying about systems or even advising students or finding the right program, like all of these pieces, how that curiosity allows for more space for possibilities and that checking in on what makes the most sense in that moment.
Right, right, right. And I mean, I've loved watching students explore. And I think if I could keep them excited about the class that I was teaching, keep them opening up their vision, then usually they would come to class. If we were in a face to face class. Um, and it was a way to generate excitement and, like you said, possibility. And we all want more possibilities. I mean, sometimes we want it not to be too many because then it's hard to make decisions, but enough that we can, you know, put a direction and keep going with that direction.
Mhm.
Well, I was thinking when we were talking about school and the university. One of the things that I enjoyed was looking for um, the possibility of a new direction. Like we had the minor, and so when we started CASAT. CASAT got started because we had this academic program and we created a minor. Um, but then we said, well, really, our master's students who are out there counseling people, they need this information too. So then we added the master's specialization. And as we keep going, then there's gambling. Oh my, we need to add a gambling, courses on gambling. Oh, we need a family course. And that excitement that comes from being able to say there's more than one way to really get the get information across. Some people really do think more analytically. For example, I was thinking if my partner Chuck Holt was doing this interview, he would be talking about something totally different
Mhm.
because he's a different human being and he focused differently. He's much more analytical and he reads all the time and he thinks in a very more structured kind of way than I do. Um, And boy, that would be exciting. It's exciting to think differently. Some students are going to be more attracted to that kind of way of learning, while some other students are going to be more attracted to the relational aspect, which I tend to be more relational and conceptual. And he, for example, is relational and analytical. And so knowing that also helped me learn how he and I needed to converse
Mhm.
because we would sometimes go down and into that cul-de-sac where we're not hearing each other. We're not able to communicate because his analytical was stronger and my conceptual was stronger, and we were missing each other. So as I learned that, I thought, well, that transfers over to students as well. That some students are going to really get a lot more out of being in a class with him or someone who's more analytical than with me. And that's okay. That's why we have different instructors.
Mhm. I'm also imagining that that shows up in your couples therapy.
Absolutely. All the time. And you go, why are we in this stupid fight? You know, we don't even know how we got here.
Mhm. Yes, I was definitely thinking that miscommunication, and I would imagine that's one of the human things that has been prevalent or you've noticed throughout your entire career. Um,
And understand it better and better all the time. I mean, I think I'm still learning, certainly.
mhm,
And when somebody asks me what kind of therapy I do, I say it's systems, but I say it's like a jigsaw puzzle. Sometimes there's straight edges on one side, and sometimes it's all curvy. But if I can stay open to that, this piece didn't work, but another one might, then I can keep working, and I don't give up easily. I'm very filled with hope and possibility because I know that it's just about finding the right pieces
mm,
and putting them in the right places that help pull things together.
mhm. Yeah, and that curiosity piece of being able to stay open to knowing that you don't have all the right answers. And I almost hear like this beginner's mind as you approach different people, different projects, and trusting the tools and the knowledge you've gained along the way as well.
And being willing to keep learning. Like there's, new things come around. And so, we can oftentimes write new ways of working off. And then all of a sudden, 20 years later, they're now popular. And you go, oh, what happened? How come I didn't look at that a little bit better? What stopped me? And maybe sometimes we learn things before their time. Like, for example, EFT, not emotionally focused family therapy, but EFT meaning tapping. That particular technique was developed originally, the original development of that was 40 years ago, and it was really written off as something not, too unusual, too off the norm. Today, it's considered something that we can see the value because we understand the brain a little bit better now than we did back then. So I find that if I'm willing to keep uh, open to learning new things, that I may not use them yet, but at least if I remain open to them, I might understand when they come back up again 30 years later.
I love that.
I mean, we never knew yoga and mindfulness was going to be such an important part of therapy, for example.
Hmm.
In the beginning, that wasn't what it was.
It's it's so fascinating to me as I think about those pieces because I've been in the yoga and mindfulness world for, 20 and 10 years consecutively. And um, I'm aware of also like we as a society don't believe it makes a difference until we have enough research to prove it. Right. And that we know from being in the academic world that that takes at least 10 to 20 years to create enough literature to be able to show that it's effective. And so I guess my question for you is anyone out there who's seeing things in the world who wants to develop, a theory or a program, Do you have any advice for them?
Hmm. Well, that's interesting. That's an interesting question. Um, I guess I would say, well, I was thinking about this from, if you, again, if you think of from a political standpoint as well, that sometimes we need both those who are rigidly advocating a particular thing, and we need those who go, maybe. We need both to be able to come up with the best options at a moment in time. Um, so I would say it's staying open and yet not trying to close yourself down. Um, there, I'm not being very clear right now. This here's an example. Back of probably 25 years ago, I was working in the domestic violence field a little bit, and I was consulting and seeing families and people who, and I'm not an advocate for domestic violence. I want to tell you, certainly, but I also want to understand it. And so, one of the things that I said at that time was, the research is not changing, the data is not changing. We have as many incidences now today as we had 25 years ago. But that doesn't mean the work that the advocates were doing didn't count. What they were doing was educating a new group of people. And as new people came in, as young people grew in, it was going to, they too then needed to be educated. And so don't give up, I guess is what I'm saying, is what you are thinking you might be just putting it down a little bit off center, and you just need to kind of keep working with it and keep wondering about it, keep researching it a little bit, and keep tweaking it just a tiny bit so that it actually fits. Um, and so what did we learn in that, 25 years ago? We learned, don't give up, keep educating, keep trying to help people learn what this looks like, why it's dangerous. The same thing is true in our ethics. Our ethics don't, the ethical incidences are similar to what they were 50 years ago because it's human beings. Human beings still have to learn. That's about what being a human being is growing and learning. So I would think if you have a vision, don't give up on that vision, but don't rigidify too strongly so that you don't have the ability to shift it a little bit. I'm thinking of um, somatic therapy, for example. You know, the man who started that, he lived in Reno when he was writing his first book. That would be 36 years ago, around that time. Um, I'm sure he had the vision then, but it wasn't until later that he was able to create it in such a way that people embraced it. And so I think it's the combination of looking for how we can get it across, how we can do the research, and how we can change it a little bit so that it works.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm hearing patience and trust in that too. I think trusting in that
Mhm.
vision, trusting in the process and the work that's being done, and patience to sort of see it come to fruition.
And being open to feedback, like like when I was when I was teaching a class, if somebody said, "Well, I don't get this," I can either say, "Well, that's their problem," or I can say, what do I need to do to help make this make more sense to that brain?" That brain is a little different than my brain. And so if I'm open in that way and I'm patient and I'm willing, then I think don't give up on your dreams.
Well, Mary, as we wrap our time today, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Well, I think the last statement really is an important one, that to not give up on our dreams, to also believe in humanity, believe in the possibility of um, change, believe in the possibility of growth, um, to know that community is a big piece of that, that as we work together, we can probably do just about anything. And so we don't have to go it alone. It's only like NRAP was started not because I did something by myself or Daniel did something by himself. It's because we worked together. His vision, my belief in his vision, and us being able to pull that together. I think we are a team. And if we continue to think of ourselves as a team, we can do just about anything. That would be a big piece of it.
Well,
And keep going. Don't, and make it be joyful. Look for the joy and the possibility.
as always, Mary, it has been a joy to be with you. I so appreciate you. Um, thank you.
So thank you. I really have enjoyed doing this too.
Thank you for listening to CASAT Conversations, your resource for exploring behavioral health topics. We hope you found today's conversation timely and meaningful. Please share this podcast with your friends and colleagues. If you want to learn more, visit us at our blog at CASATOnDemand.org.
CASAT Podcast Network. This podcast has been brought to you by the CASAT Podcast Network, located within the Center for the Application of Substance Abuse Technologies, a part of the School of Public Health at the University of Nevada, Reno. For more podcast information and resources, visit CASAT.org.